I'm considered by some an unlikely person to be president of the National Rifle Association. I am often asked how a Jewish woman, a native of San Francisco, and a graduate of Stanford University and Harvard Law became president of the NRA. In other words, what's a nice girl like you doing involved with guns? Some 25 years ago, I was a young lawyer living alone in Los Angeles. It was 3 o'clock in the morning when a sound at my front door woke me up. There was a man outside with a screwdriver in the lock on my front door trying to break in. I had no idea what to do, and I would have no chance against a man like the man who was on the other side of the door. Then all of a sudden, the noise on the other side of the door stopped, and I crept down to the door and I looked outside and he was gone. Evidently, he couldn't get through the lock on my door. Finally, the police arrived. But that night, I swore that I would never let anything like this happen again. I realized ultimately that I am responsible for my own personal safety. The next day, I was a woman on a mission. I went to a local gun store. I told the man behind the counter that I wanted to buy a gun. So he asked me why I wanted a gun, and I told him about what had happened the night before. He suggested I take a firearms safety course and before buying anything, and I signed up for that. I agreed. In fact, I took a couple of courses, and I found out that shooting a gun wasn't that difficult, and it was fun when I hit the bullseye, and soon I bought my first firearm. Let me tell you, my life would never be the same again. It's been quite a journey, and in another sense, the journey is just beginning. And I'd like to tell you about a couple of things that I'm going to focus on as NRA president that might be of particular interest to you. The first is self-defense. The Second Amendment was written so that individual American citizens could protect their rights to life, liberty, and property against any who would seek to deprive them of those rights. When a single criminal attempts to deprive you of your individual rights by endangering your life or your well-being or that of your family or children, you have the right, guaranteed by the Second Amendment, to defend yourself and your family. Now, this is important for everyone, but it's more important, statistically speaking, for older Americans than it is for people in their prime. And overall, it's more important for women than it is for men. So NRA will be promoting and expanding major initiatives that will help all Americans, and especially women, have access to programs to teach them how to safely and responsibly purchase, own, learn to use, and store firearms. In addition to these programs, the rapid spread of right-to-carry legislation in America has greatly improved the ability of ordinary Americans to defend themselves. 38 states now have laws that allow for their law-abiding citizens to have concealed carry permits. Everyone is safer when the criminals don't know who's armed. It keeps each of us safer and enables each of us to safeguard one another. And NRA will continue to work to restore and expand this fundamental right of safety and security to every corner of our land. As an NRA president who not only happens to be a woman, but also happens to be a lawyer, I want to be sure to mention the other major policy matter that I'm focusing on during my presidency of NRA, the federal judiciary. America needs more good judges. Even if we pass the most sweeping and comprehensive self-protection law in the country, even if we tailor legislation to strictly adhere to the guarantees of the Second Amendment, and even if we secure countless victories for pro-Second Amendment candidates for office up and down the line, any of these accomplishments can be struck down with the stroke of a pen and the bang of a gavel by an activist judge. In countless cases across this great nation of ours, and more so it seems over the past few years, some federal judges have been imposing a radical political and social agenda upon the American people, bypassing our elected leaders. Groups on the far left have been achieving through activist court rulings what they've been unable to achieve through the ballot box. This judicial activism violates our constitutional system of separation of powers It violates the safeguards to our liberties enshrined in the Bill of Rights, and it must end. Such activism does violence to our Constitution and endangers our civil rights, including our Second Amendment right to keep arms, and we must oppose it. We must call for good judges who will be faithful to the Constitution as written. This is especially important when it comes to the United States Supreme Court. The 9 justices who sit upon the Supreme Court are the ultimate guardians and interpreters of the supreme law of the land, our Constitution. Each of us needs to be concerned and engaged, working for the nomination and prompt confirmation of new justices who will commit themselves to judicial restraint and reverence for the text of the Constitution and Bill of Rights as understood at the time they were written. I can't help but notice that the current media spectacle over federal judges is centered on several judicial nominees, many of whom are women. We're being told that they are being posed simply because they are suspected of being conservative. There are those in the media saying that last year's elections were not a mandate for bold new policy in America. There are those who say that last year's elections were not an endorsement of the president, his policies, and a conservative agenda in Congress. Don't you believe it? The bottom line is we won, they lost, and it's high time we showed it, and it's high time they accepted it. You prove by your work and even by your very existence that the conservative side is alive and well in America today. As a leader of the NRA, I'm grateful to be a part of this. The 2004 elections were the most successful election cycle ever in NRA history. As an organization, we are absolutely thrilled by these recent victories, and we're humbled by the trust and support of so many patriotic Americans that have given of their talents, their time, and their resources to bring about such wonderful results for the American people, the protection of our freedom and our way of life in America.